A millionaire asked his daughter to choose a new mother from among 5 wealthy women. But he chose the black Maid when he discovered the truth about who really cared for the girl. "This woman shouldn't even be in the same room as us," Claudia Van Doren whispered to the other candidates as she watched Marissa Cole quietly sweep up the shards of shattered crystal from the gleaming marble floor of the Kingsley Manor dining hall. The glass had been knocked over during lunch by the 5 socialites competing to become the new wife of millionaire widower Richard Kingsley. Marissa, 29, had been working at the sprawling Savannah estate for only 3 months. But in that short time, she had completely transformed the life of 7-year-old Lila, who had lost her mother in a car accident the year before. What the candidates didn't know was that every cruel whisper, every narrowed glance, every attempt at humiliation was being closely observed by someone who knew far more than they could imagine. "Daddy, why are those women being mean to Marissa?" Lila had asked that morning. Hiding behind the heavy oak door to his study, Richard heard his daughter's question replay in his head as he watched live footage from the hidden security cameras that showed Marissa enduring snide remarks from 5 women who had arrived 2 weeks earlier for his marriage competition. The unusual idea had come from his therapist: allow Lila to spend time living alongside different women for a month and choose who she wanted as her new mother. Richard had carefully selected 5 candidates from the highest rungs of society: a lawyer, a doctor, a business mogul, a socialite, and an architect. All white, all rich, all flawless on paper. But from day one, something dark began to take root. The 5 women, led by the calculating Claudia Van Doren, whose family fortune came from luxury real estate, launched a quiet but relentless campaign against Marissa. Not because she was a threat. After all, she was just the maid. But because Lila seemed to light up only when Marissa was around. "That girl needs to learn her place," scoffed Harper Lowell, the ambitious lawyer, during a dinner party they assumed was private. "It's important she knows exactly who belongs in her circle and who doesn't." What they didn't know was that Richard had installed microphones throughout the mansion after noticing Lila withdrawing again. The little girl, who had been slowly finding joy, was once more waking from nightmares and eating dinner in silence. Marissa, who held a degree in childhood education but had taken on cleaning work to pay for her mother's cancer treatment, never imagined her gentle kindness toward Lila would draw such venom. Every morning while making breakfast, she overheard comments about people who don't know their place and bad influences for children from good families. But there was one thing none of the candidates noticed. In Marissa's eyes, behind the lowered lashes, was a calm determination forged by years of overcoming prejudice. When she lowered her head in the face of insults, it wasn't surrender, it was strategy. The kind of patience that waits for the perfect moment to turn the tables. If you're enjoying this story of how cruelty can backfire, make sure you subscribe to the channel, because what these women didn't know was that their days of belittling Marissa were numbered, and their downfall would be far more dramatic than they could imagine. The very next morning, Claudia gathered the other 4 candidates inside the mansion's private library, a vast room lined with towering bookshelves, far from the eyes and ears they thought might be watching. The plan they were about to hatch was as cold as it was calculated. "We need to be strategic about this situation," Claudia Van Doren said, adjusting her diamond drop earrings as she peered through the tall bay window. Outside, Marissa Cole was in the garden, laughing as she played hopscotch with little Lila under the soft morning sun. "That woman is influencing the child in a way that's completely inappropriate for our social class." Harper Lowell, the sharp-tongued corporate lawyer, flipped open her embossed leather planner. "I've checked the legal routes. Richard can dismiss any household employee for cultural incompatibility without facing legal pushback." "Cultural incompatibility? What a polite little euphemism," scoffed Dr. Elise Carrington, the dermatologist who catered exclusively to Savannah's elite. "The problem is far less subtle than that." Naomi Whitford, the celebrated architect whose designs graced the estates of 3 state governors, shook her head with open disdain. "Lila needs to understand early on about appropriate circles. This closeness to the help is giving her unrealistic ideas about how the world works." Isabel Thorne, heiress to a chain of luxury resorts, cut through the conversation without ceremony. "Let's stop sugarcoating it. The problem is that a black maid is taking up emotional space that should belong to one of us. Lila should be clinging to her future stepmother, not the cleaning staff." What none of them realized was that Marissa had been hearing conversations like this since she was a child. The daughter of a housekeeper who had served wealthy families for over 30 years, she knew every code word, every veiled insult, every polite-sounding justification the privileged used to excuse cruelty. At 14, she had watched her own mother be dismissed after 2 decades of flawless service, fired because the employer's teenage son had grown too fond of her. She could still hear the chilling words, "She doesn't know her place." Now, 14 years later, those same poisonous whispers were echoing through the grand halls of Kingsley Manor. But these women couldn't see the steel that lived beneath Marissa's calm exterior. Her degree from Clark Atlanta University wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a quiet declaration of defiance against the very system that had tried to break her family. During her 3 years teaching in public schools before being forced into domestic work to fund her mother's cancer treatment, Marissa had learned to read people with surgical precision. She knew exactly when she was being underestimated and exactly how to use it. That afternoon, as Lila skipped down the hallway toward the kitchen, Claudia stepped into her path. "Lila, darling, how about we do something more sophisticated today? I brought you a chess set from Paris, solid ivory pieces. I think it's time you learned." "I don't know how to play chess," Lila said plainly, attempting to move past her. "That's exactly why you should learn," Harper added, placing herself in the girl's way. "Intellectual games are essential for developing a privileged mind." "Marissa taught me checkers yesterday," Lila said brightly. "She told me games help you think better, any kind of game." Elise shot Harper a knowing look. "Sweetheart, some games are more fitting for certain people." Just then, Marissa appeared in the kitchen doorway, carrying a tray of warm, golden brown cookies. She had heard every word, yet her face carried only a serene, almost maternal warmth. "Sorry to interrupt," she said, her voice a masterclass in polite grace. "Lila, your chocolate chip cookies are ready." The child's eyes lit up instantly. "Marissa, did you make the butterfly-shaped ones like you promised?" "I did, sweet pea. And I've saved some extras for after dinner." Claudia's jaw tightened as she watched them. That ease, that natural affection, it was a bond she couldn't compete with. And it made her next move feel even more urgent. What Claudia didn't know was that someone else in the mansion was listening too, and they were about to make sure this quiet war didn't end the way she planned. "Marissa," Claudia said, testing the maid's name for the first time, rolling it off her tongue, as though it were an unpleasant foreign word. "Don't you think you're taking on too much responsibility with Lila? We're here to handle those developmental needs." Marissa smiled politely, but there was a flicker, quick and sharp, in her deep brown eyes. "Of course, Miss Claudia. I was only following Mr. Richards' instructions about keeping Lila fed and happy." "Naturally," Isabel chimed in, stepping closer. "But feeding is different from forming emotional bonds. It would be best to keep a healthy professional distance." "I understand perfectly," Marissa replied, her tone honey-sweet but edged with steel. "I've always been taught that caring for children means giving them exactly what they need, exactly when they need it." The answer was polite, too polite, the kind that made the 5 women's stomachs tighten. They were beginning to suspect that beneath Marissa's quiet humility was a mind far sharper than they had assumed. That night, Richard sat in his study, eyes fixed on the security monitors. The candidates thought they were being clever, coordinating a plan to record every so-called transgression Marissa committed, intending to hand him a damning dossier. But what the footage actually revealed was damning in an entirely different way. Every clip showed Marissa moving with quiet professionalism, preparing meals, helping with homework, tending to Lila's scraped knee with genuine warmth. In contrast, the recordings captured 5 grown women visibly unsettled by the child's affection for her caregiver. And then there was something darker, a pattern Richard hadn't fully seen before. Subtle sabotage. Books accidentally, hidden so Lila couldn't find her favorite bedtime story. Snide remarks about Marissa's background, whispered just loudly enough for little ears to catch. Small, calculated traps designed to make her look incompetent. "Daddy," Lila said at dinner that night, her fork paused over her plate, "why don't the ladies like Marissa?" The words landed like a silent explosion. Forks froze. Smiles turned to stone. "What kind of question is that, darling?" Claudia said, forcing a syrupy tone. "We like all the staff." "That's not true," Lila said with the brutal clarity only a child could manage. "I heard you say she didn't know her place." Richard felt the blood drain from his face. "Lila, where did you hear that?" "In the library this morning. They were talking about making Marissa go away." The silence that followed was suffocating. 5 sophisticated, articulate women, speechless, exposed by a 7-year-old who had unknowingly dismantled their scheme in one sentence. You must have misunderstood, Harper jumped in quickly. Adult conversations sometimes sound different to children. But Richard was watching their faces, and there it was. The guilt. The fear. Confirmation that his daughter had understood every word. Worse still, Richard realized that Lila wasn't the only person in this mansion who had been underestimated. Each slight, every attempt to diminish Marissa had only made her stronger. She was powered by something the others couldn't recognize. Years of enduring and overcoming injustices just like this. She didn't need to fight them directly. She only had to stand firm and let their arrogance undo them. On Wednesday morning, Marissa rose 2 hours earlier than usual. In the quiet of the servants' annex, she pulled out her old phone and dialed a number she had memorized years ago. Her older sister answered groggily from Washington, D.C. "Riss? It's barely dawn." "Diane," Marissa said, her eyes fixed on the faint glow of the main house in the distance. "I need you to do something for me. Something important." Diane sat up in bed. "Tell me what you need." Marissa hesitated for just a moment, then her voice hardened into resolve. "I think it's time certain people in this house learn that quiet doesn't mean powerless, and humility doesn't mean blind. Remember those contacts you still have from your time at the Department of Education." Diane Carter, a Howard University graduate with a degree in investigative journalism and now a senior producer at CNN, instantly heard the strain in her younger sister's voice. "Marissa, what's going on? You never call me at this hour." "I'm being targeted by 5 wealthy women who want me gone," Marissa said plainly. "And I need ammunition to defend myself." For the next 20 minutes, she laid it all out. The whispered insults disguised as social guidance, the calculated sabotages, the racial undertones dressed up as polite concern. Diane didn't interrupt once. She'd heard stories like this before, but never from her own family. "Are you sure you want to go to war with them?" Diane asked carefully. "These women have money, lawyers, and friends in high places." "Diane," Marissa said firmly, "our mother spent 30 years cleaning homes for people like this, being humiliated, underpaid, and replaced without a second thought. I won't let her story repeat. Not while Lila is depending on me." The mention of Lila changed everything. Diane knew her sister's bond with the child was real, built over months of comfort, laughter, and stability in a home that otherwise ran on cold formality. "All right," Diane said, her voice sharpening. "Give me their full names in 48 hours. I'll find out everything you need." Meanwhile, Richard had quietly launched his own investigation. He'd hired Marcus Hayes, a private investigator known for uncovering the hidden skeletons of the social elite. And what he found was worse than either sister had imagined. Claudia Ashworth, expelled from 2 charity boards for financial misconduct, covered up by her family's oil fortune. Isabel Montgomery, a history of employee harassment lawsuits, including several alleging racial bias. Harper Whitfield lost her medical license in 2 states before setting up a boutique clinic in Georgia. Rebecca Sterling, investigated by the IRS for tax evasion, narrowly escaping formal charges. Amelia Chase, facing 3 lawsuits from former hotel employees over a racially hostile work environment. Mr. Blackwell, Marcus said over an encrypted call, "These aren't just entitled women, they're predators. The kind who use wealth as a weapon and crush anyone who threatens their standing." Back at the mansion, the 5 women were doubling down. Claudia had crafted a meticulous campaign to paint Marissa as unfit, every minor mishap documented, every act of kindness twisted into something suspicious. "Every mistake, every time she steps over the line, we log it," Claudia said in a hushed meeting in Isabel's suite. "Richard's a rational man. Enough evidence, and he'll have no choice but to fire her." Isabel slid her laptop across the bedspread. "Here's a behavioral report I drafted: violations of family privacy, inappropriate influence over Lila, emotional manipulation of her employer. All fabricated, of course," Harper added with a smug smile. "But framed in a way that'll sound credible. And with my medical background, I can make the psychological impact on the child sound concerning." Rebecca and Amelia exchanged satisfied glances, convinced they had engineered Marissa's downfall, professional, systematic, and in their minds impossible to fight back against for a maid with no power, no resources, and no voice. What they didn't realize was that Marissa wasn't just quietly enduring anymore. She was preparing. And when her moment came, she wouldn't just defend herself. She'd make sure the truth reached far beyond the mansion walls. What the 5 women didn't know was that Marissa Carter had seen this exact playbook before. Back in her years working in public schools, she'd faced principals and department heads who used identical tactics to push out black educators who didn't fit the so-called institutional culture. That afternoon, while dusting shelves in Richard Blackwell's private study, Marissa noticed a document left on the printer tray. She wasn't snooping, but when the bold title candidate behavioral report caught her eye, she couldn't ignore it. Page by page, she read every fabricated allegation, every twisted account of her moments with Lila, each one attempting to recast her affection as something unprofessional or suspect. Instead of panic, a cold, steady calm took over. It was the same armor she'd forged at 14, the day she watched her own mother be dismissed after decades of loyal service, her only crime being that the children she cared for loved her too much. That night, after tucking Lila into bed, Marissa made a call that would shift the balance of power. Professor Angela Morrison. Marissa, it's been years. How are you? I need your help. Urgently. This is about the emotional well-being of a child in a very fragile environment. Angela Morrison, one of the nation's leading experts in child development and separation trauma, had once mentored Marissa during her graduate research at Clark Atlanta University. She understood instantly. You want an independent evaluation. Exactly. And it has to be airtight, legally, ethically, academically. Something they can't spin, twist, or dismiss. For the next 40 minutes, the two women built not just a defense plan, but an offensive strategy. One that used the very expertise Marissa's enemies assumed she didn't have. The following day, Richard's hidden cameras captured the women's cruelest sabotage yet. They had stolen Lila's favorite teddy bear, a cherished gift from her late mother, and planted it in Marissa's small room in the servants' wing. "Lila, honey, look what we found," Claudia Ashworth cooed theatrically, pulling the bear from Marissa's closet while the child's face crumpled. It was in the maid's room. Lila's lip trembled. "Marissa, why did you take my teddy bear?" "I didn't take it, sweetheart," Marissa said gently, though Richard could see the ache in her eyes even through the grainy feed. "Someone must have put it there by mistake." "Mistake?" Isabel Montgomery scoffed, pretending to be shocked. "Lila, did you leave it there yourself?" "No," the child whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I always keep him on my bed." Harper Whitfield crouched to Lila's level, her tone dripping with false sympathy. "Sometimes, darling, people take things that aren't theirs. Not always to be mean, but out of envy." It was then Richard witnessed something remarkable. Marissa didn't raise her voice. She didn't plead her innocence. She simply wrapped her arms around Lila and whispered, "You know in your heart I would never take anything of yours. And people who truly love you would never try to confuse that heart." The quiet strength of that moment, her dignity standing in stark contrast to the calculated cruelty before him, hit Richard like a punch. This wasn't just prejudice. This was a coordinated attempt to break both a loyal employee and his daughter's trust. That night, as the five women clinked champagne glasses in Isabel's suite, celebrating what they believed was Marissa's downfall, two conversations elsewhere were sealing their fate. In the annex, Marissa's phone lit up. "Sister, you're not going to believe what I found out about your competition," Diane said, her voice electric with triumph. "And the best part, every bit of it is public record." Across the estate, Richard was on a secure call with Marcus Hayes. "I've seen enough," he said flatly. "It's time we turn the tables." Both sister and employer had reached the same conclusion. The game was over. Richard Blackwell had seen enough. He had gathered more than enough evidence, and with every clip, every document, every recorded whisper, his anger had sharpened into something cold and deliberate. The days of watching quietly were over. But before taking his next step, he needed to have a very serious conversation with the woman he had underestimated from a start, the woman who was about to learn she had allies and resources far greater than anything her attackers could have imagined. Every act of cruelty had only strengthened Marissa Carter's resolve. And each petty insult had revealed a mind capable of turning their own weapons back on them, transforming every attack into ammunition for a counterstrike they would never see coming. Friday morning, Richard called a special meeting in the Grand Salon of Blackwell Manor. The five women, dressed in designer suits and dripping with smug confidence, arrived convinced this was the day the winner of his so-called competition would be crowned. But in the shadows of a room sat Dr. Angela Morrison, Diane Carter-Johnson from CNN, and Marcus Hayes, the private investigator who had been quietly dismantling their reputations. "Ladies," Richard began, his tone formal, "before I share my decision, there are some interesting findings I'd like you to see." Claudia Ashworth crossed her legs and smirked. Of course, Richard. We're eager to hear them. The large wall screen flickered to life. The first image, a news headline. Charity scandal. Socialite Claudia Ashworth accused of diverting funds. Claudia's photo filled the screen. That's a fabrication, she snapped, her voice shaking. Is it? Diane rose to her feet, eyes locked on Claudia. I'm Diane Carter-Johnson, CNN. Every word of that investigation was verified and triple-sourced. Richard clicked to the next slide. Racial discrimination suit filed against high-profile attorney Isabel Montgomery. This is taken out of context. Isabel stammered. Context. Marcus Hayes stepped forward, dropping a thick folder onto the table. All of this is public record. Court filings. Witness statements. Signed affidavits. Click. Medical license revoked in 2 states. Harper Whitfield under fire for malpractice. Click. IRS probe. Victoria Sterling investigated for tax evasion. Click. Former employees sue Amanda Chase over racially hostile work environment. The color drained from their faces. You are not just petty, Richard said coldly. You are predators. And I have documented every calculated attempt you've made to destroy Marissa. He pressed play. The salon filled with their own voices, racist remarks, plans for sabotage, the teddy bear setup. Every word, every sneer, every poisonous laugh. This is an invasion of privacy. Claudia shouted. Invasion. Richard's laugh was short and sharp. You conspired under my roof to destroy a woman who has done nothing but care for my child. Dr. Morrison stepped forward, her voice calm but commanding. As an expert in child development, I evaluated Lila this week. She is thriving emotionally under Marissa's care, something crucial to her recovery from trauma. Any disruption to that bond would be damaging. At that, Lila, who had been waiting quietly in the hall, ran into the room and straight into Marissa's arms. Marissa, you're not leaving, are you? No, sweetheart, Marissa murmured, hugging her tightly. Richard turned to the women. Marissa Carter holds a degree in education from Clark Atlanta University, multiple specializations in child development, and an unblemished record of service. The only reason you targeted her is because she's a black maid and because my daughter loves her more than she'll ever love any of you. Claudia tried one last desperate angle. Richard, think about Emma's. I am thinking about her, he cut in sharply. Then he turned to Marissa. Marissa, will you marry me? The room fell utterly silent. Marissa looked at Lila, then back at Richard. I will. Lila squealed in delight. Now Marissa will really be my mom. The 5 women sat frozen, faces pale, eyes wide, as reality sank in. You're going to marry the maid. Harper whispered, her voice trembling. I'm marrying the most honest woman I've ever known, Richard said, the woman who gave my daughter genuine love, while you schemed to destroy her for sport. Diane lifted her phone, camera rolling. This will be on air Monday. Elite socialites exposed, the fall of 5 predators. And just like that, the war they thought they were winning ended in total public defeat. Their reputations, careers, and social circles are destroyed, Marcus Hayes said flatly. All documented. All irrefutable. Claudia Ashworth stood abruptly, clutching her designer bag. I'm leaving. Richard Blackwell stepped in front of the door. Oh, one last thing, his voice was cold. I'm suing all of you for conspiracy, slander, and attempted destruction of character. My legal team is already on it. The 5 women walked out in silent humiliation, their expensive heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. Outside, cameras flashed as Diane Johnson's journalist colleagues captured every moment. Within minutes, their phones were ringing, clients cutting ties, friends turning their backs, and family members demanding explanations after seeing the story explode online. In the center of the room, Marissa Carter stood with her head high, holding Lila close. Thank you for believing in me, she said quietly. Richard smiled at her, his voice warm but steady. And thank you for showing me what really matters. He kissed her softly. And while the women who had tried to destroy her watched their lives unravel, Marissa's own life was just beginning, built on true love, mutual respect, and the ultimate triumph of dignity over prejudice. Because sometimes the greatest revenge is to live so well that your enemies can only watch as their masks fall for the entire world to see. 2 years later, Diane's exposé had become a case study in journalism and sociology programs nationwide, an example of how systemic prejudice thrives in elite circles and how it can be dismantled. The Blackwell Five had suffered devastating, irreversible consequences. Claudia Ashworth lost her inheritance after the Ashworth Family Board uncovered her charity embezzlement. She now works as a retail clerk, often recognized and avoided by customers who remember her face from the scandal. Isabel Montgomery was fired from her law firm and disbarred for ethics violations. Victoria Sterling went bankrupt after her architecture clients abandoned her. Harper Whitfield quietly left the state after her medical practice collapsed under malpractice lawsuits. Amanda Chase sold her luxury hotel chain to settle multiple discrimination claims. Marissa's life, however, had flourished. Richard insisted she finish her master's degree in special education, and together they founded the Lila Foundation for the Arts, providing scholarships for underprivileged children in music, theater, and visual arts. Mama Marissa, look what I learned on the piano today. 9-year-old Lila ran into the music room, fingers gliding over the keys. She now spoke fluent Portuguese, thanks to lessons from Marissa's grandmother, who had moved into the Blackwell estate. The family had grown. 6-month-old Richard Jr. slept peacefully in Marissa's arms as she reviewed foundation grant applications. "Honey, another thank you letter," Richard said, handing her an envelope. From a mother in Detroit, her son just got a full violin scholarship. Marissa's eyes softened. She thought of Lila's question the week before. Why did those mean ladies want you to leave? "Sweetheart," Marissa had said, "some people are born with everything and think it makes them better than others. But here's the secret. They always destroy themselves because kindness and cruelty can't live in the same heart." A few weeks later, Richard appeared on the country's most-watched morning show. "Mr. Blackwell," the host asked, "do you regret your controversial choice to marry Marissa?" Richard chuckled. "Controversial? I married a woman who's educated, intelligent, saved my daughter from heartbreak, and taught me what family truly means. If that's controversial, the problem isn't with me." The host pressed, "What about the social differences?" Richard leaned toward the camera. "What differences? My wife speaks 3 languages, runs a foundation that's changed thousands of lives, and raises our children with more love and wisdom than any so-called socialite I've ever met." At home, Marissa watched the interview with Lila in her lap, pride swelling in her chest. At school, other children would ask Lila about her famous mother. "She's the bravest woman in the world," Lila would say. "And she makes the best chocolate cake, too." Marissa's revenge had never been to destroy her enemies. Her victory was to live so well that her happiness became undeniable proof they had been wrong about her worth from the start. That Sunday, she watched from the terrace as Richard played with Lila and baby Richard Jr. in the same garden where she had once been humiliated. "Love." Richard called out, "Come here, Lila wants to play you the song she wrote for you." Marissa walked toward her family, knowing in her heart that the greatest revenge is not to answer hatred with hatred, but to build a life so full of love, joy, and success that it completely rewrites the rules of the game.